Welcome to the book review of Enterprise Risk Management, a practical guide to a quick start. This book is dedicated to the many organizations we consult for, and the people who attended our training programs on enterprise risk management, raised questions and concerns, and shared their experiences, for without them, this book would not have been possible. Traditional risk management has been about reacting to something having gone wrong, or going wrong, and implementing controls according to its severity, preventing it from going wrong again, and ensuring and protecting the organization from damages and liabilities, while incrementally adding on to the list of what goes wrong, but without much analysis of multiple sources and impacts from across the organization, and rarely considering the opportunities that come with risks. On the other hand, enterprise risk management is about proactively identifying all possible sources of threats and opportunities to the organization's objectives, determining the upside and downside risks ranging from policies to detailed operations, in a holistic and connected manner, analyzing the potential severity and likelihood levels of these risks, and taking actions to prevent or exploit them beneficially. Risk management, once limited to financial activities, has transcended to include all activities and situations faced by the organization, becoming an essential part of good governance. The environmental, social and governance movement has made risk management an essential part for investing and funding. Also, from being a legal requirement for hazardous operations, enterprise risk management has become an essential part of most international management system standards. And often risk management has been implemented specifically for those standards, like quality management will include quality-related risks, environmental standards look into environment-related risks, and energy standards focus on energy-related risks. What we need is holistic risk management, and enterprise risk management offers that. It consolidates strategic planning with operations and its management systems, providing comprehensive and proactive controls. And enterprise risk management will continue to expand its usefulness in all business and societal organizations and governmental activities. This book is meant for organizations to quickly get started with enterprise risk management, organization-wide or in specific areas. Many of the ideas will also be useful to improve ongoing enterprise risk management. Though comprehensive with all the relevant information to start and run a successful enterprise risk management, it is a relatively short book of about 170 body pages. The information is crisp and straight to the point, and is meant for the busy executive or student of enterprise risk management. The 37 figures, 34 tables, 5 templates and numerous pictures, make it easy to understand, apply and improve enterprise risk management. The first chapter lays the foundation of what is ERM, positive and negative risks or opportunities and threats, or, later on, upside and downside risks, the 7 stages of implementing and managing ERM, with an overview of each of those stages. Within 4 pages, for diagrams and some pictures, the reader is prepared for what to expect in the rest of the book. Since risks are everywhere, we first discuss, in the second chapter, about knowing what to look for, with brief guidelines setting the direction on how to start with enterprise risk management. Then we move on to being aware of threats and opportunities, or positive and negative risks. We tie in with strategic planning's environmental analysis and identify 15 major areas of the corporate environment, with many examples to thoroughly prepare us to use enterprise risk management to help achieve the organization's strategic objectives. From the organization objectives and threat and opportunity analysis, we can now determine in what context we will view risks, or the threats and opportunities we should be concerned about. Since risk appetite will also determine our risk context, we introduce it here, to be further discussed in later stages. We study examples to ensure our understanding of risk context, and introduce the tools to do this, recording them as strategic and operational contexts. Once we have done risk context, we now determine the criteria for these contexts. While the context tells us what we should be concerned about, the criteria give us the specifics of the contexts, so that we can define them for risk management. By now we would have developed a directory of risk context and criteria. We again look at many examples of risk context and criteria, drawing the specifics for the criteria, learning that some criteria can stay at the directory level, while many others will cascade to other levels of controls in the organization. Further down the book we discuss risk criteria introduced by other stakeholders. In the meantime, throughout the book, we keep touching base with strategic planning and organization purpose and objectives. And a traceability system helps us manage this. We also introduce the risk record here that we will build on as we progress. And discuss risk criteria determined by other stakeholders, like the authorities and customers. We introduce a particular thinking skill, called preemptive thinking, that will be essential for enterprise risk management, and present an overview of competency development at different levels of the organization. Reference is made to the preemptive thinking book by the same author. Then we move on to the identification of risks, what we need to consider, how this is affected by other factors, and the methods and tools useful to identify risks. Once risks are identified, we start on the risk register that we will continue to build on throughout the book. We then do preliminary analysis where we act on the obvious positive and negative risks without further analyzing them. They need to be identified, resolved, reassessed and returned to the register at the right place. For these obvious risks, we will skip through most of the analysis stages and perform treatment. We then move on to Chapter 3 to study and analyze all operations and subsequent events, how they are triggered, their consequences and impacts, and the complex manner they operate, where we introduce the idea of different levels of severity. Using a cause and effect analogy, we walk through the potential trigger, events, and their consequences. We also introduce the more important tools and techniques to determine the consequences, as well as their characteristics. We are now able to categorize and rate the severity of each of these consequences. We also discuss whether to use a few or many categories and what are the pros and cons of it. While looking at numerous examples from different industries, we also learn how to rate them for different events and across different industries, to achieve comparable weightages for those events. We learn how to develop the categories and their ratings. We also tackle, with numerous examples, the difficult situation when there are mixed categories of severity for events. After discussing the considerations for analyzing events and their consequences, we look into the assessment of process controls to determine how much they will affect the consequence severity and its rating. And we update the risk register with all these findings, arranging them in a logical manner. Having done the events, their impacts and severity, we move on to do the likelihood of these events happening in Chapter 4, where we confront the paradox that we avoid the occurrence of negative risks, but we need data on their occurrence to estimate their likelihoods. We learn to appreciate a lack of reliable data on the probability of their occurrence, and how we can still work within these constraints to protect our organizations. We then look into the different methods of estimating the likelihood of the risk manifesting. We are now able to categorize and rate the severity of each of these consequences. We also discuss whether to use a few or many categories and what are the pros and cons of it. While looking at numerous examples from different industries, we also learn how to rate them for different events across numerous industries, to achieve comparable weightages for those events. Like risk severity, we also categorize risk likelihood, giving them rating values, with which we will then estimate the probability of occurrence of risk events. We look into the many considerations for the estimate of risk likelihood, with certainty, uncertainty, intuition and guesswork. We will then update the risk register with the likelihood ratings. So far we have studied and analyzed the situation or event, identified what could be the consequences, what positive and negative impacts they can have and what is the likelihood of their occurrence. And we have also categorized the severity of impact and likelihood of occurrence. In this Chapter 5, we evaluate each of these risks, determine its importance, compare it with other risks, and decide how urgent it is to treat the risk. First we understand what risk evaluation is about, so that we can differentiate it from risk assessment later. And introduce risk level as a product of risk severity and likelihood, with numerical values for all of them. We now have risk scores or ratings, from which we develop risk thresholds at which point we should take action. All this while, throughout our discussions, we are looking at examples in different industries for better understanding application of enterprise risk management. From risk scores we develop different classes of risk levels, and update the risk register with these numerical values. Then we introduce the risk matrix, another way of looking at risk scores, but now with color coding and risk criteria. This will allow us to trace back to the directory of risk context and criteria and to strategic planning. We can consistently use enterprise risk management to achieve our strategic goals. After exploring risk criteria in this place, we develop various risk charts that will be helpful for the operational people to classify risks and vary their risk levels according to needs. And once again, we update the risk register with the new information. We then discuss what is risk assessment, its different stages as we have done so far, and the many tools and techniques we can use to do risk assessment. And we continue expanding the risk register with the new information. By now we have attended to the obvious risks, evaluated the other risks, ranked and prioritized them according to their significance. In Chapter 6 we decide on what to do. We will have to decide on whether the rankings of risks are acceptable or do they need to be revisited. And which of those risks need treatment, and in what priority shall treatment be done. And whether it is better to invest in the controls without treatment, or invest in the treatment. And what are the treatment methods to use, and if there are alternative methods, and what will be the best choices. And how will treatment be implemented and what will be the best strategies. And we drill down to their root causes in operations, strategies and policies. Before we address the prioritized risks from the risk register, we attend to specific situations of concern. To do this we look into risk criteria, risk appetite and risk tolerance. And in what way they can be the same or different according to situations and the people involved. We also look at a few situational examples of risk-taking and the criteria based on which we will take those risks. The examples being on the purchase of a mall property to rent out, on development of a market-appealing product, and on becoming a preferred vendor to a customer. When doing this, we learn how to use holistic enterprise risk management, the risk register and risk prioritization with specific situations that we want to improve or make decisions upon, and how we can link both of them. In this way, we use the generic enterprise risk management to attend to specific issues. Taking the example of becoming a preferred vendor from losing the customer, we now turn to the risk register, apply another risk chart, and attend to resolving this challenge. We have done the general approach to enterprise risk management as well as specific approaches to situations of concern. Now we can rearrange the risk register to risk breakdown so that we can attend to specific risk situations using the tools of holistic enterprise risk management. Extending on our earlier work, we used the losing customer example for the risk breakdown analysis. We have now linked three techniques, the risk register, situational analysis, and risk breakdown interchangeably to address any type of risk situation. We review all that we need to consider for risk evaluation before moving on to risk treatment. Now that we have prioritized and determined which risks to treat first, we will consider the factors that will affect such decisions. We discuss on 13 methods of risk treatment, while leaving the door open for other hybrid methods, looking into what will influence the choice of the treatment method. We then develop a graphical technique that will help with this decision. We then discuss cross-treatment and how more than one risk can be treated with good planning. First, we had to deal with risk severity prioritization, especially when they get the same ratings. Now we will deal with treatment priorities for same-rated risks. The risk register is then updated and now everything is clear and in place to perform the treatment. Before we move on to act on the treatment decision, we look into risk control measures for casualties in operations. Since these are related to occupational safety, and there is a need to maintain separate risk assessments of such processes, we develop methods of how to do this separately, but use the enterprise risk management system to control and manage it. In this way, the authorities are limited to addressing only safety issues, while we are able to manage it from the holistic enterprise risk management. But we do discuss in some detail how casualties can be avoided, and the accompanying risks managed, while understanding the relationship and interactions between hazard assessment and risk assessment, the limits to hazard prevention, and why we need to be careful about using them as low as reasonably practicable, or as low as reasonably achievable, or so far as is reasonably practicable. We also discuss about risks to consumers from use of products and the relationships between product or process design and instructions on how to use them. We have come a long way, and now we have to act on those decisions about the treatments. We may decide to reassess or perform the treatment according to hazards, risks, treatment method, preferences and needs. We analyze treatment effectiveness and prepare for contingencies. We also develop methods to monitor and control the effectiveness of the treatment. And we update the risk register. It would seem that the risk register contains all the information, but this cannot be, for the risk register is like a summary. The details will be in the risk record. And if necessary, because of complexity, we will generate a treatment action report. And if the treatment is extensive, we may have a risk treatment plan, or even a risk treatment project plan. And if we decide to do long-term monitoring of the treatment, we will use a treatment and controls monitoring record. In most cases, we can keep the records to a minimum. In the final chapter, we discuss about updating the current management systems, continuous monitoring and controls, and how this can be done. And how to improve the efficiency, accuracy, usability, and knowledge base of enterprise risk management. We also discuss about raising the bar and improving the overall organization performance, as well as the contents of the risk profile for different planning and organization levels as well as stakeholders. We also discuss how the enterprise risk manager can consult internally, generate management reports and communicate without seeming to threaten the risk performance of different functions. And finally, we touch on developing management systems or frameworks for enterprise risk management, as necessary. Between doing things without any care for risks, at one end, and paranoia where nothing is done, at the other end, lies enterprise risk management. And while performance management analyzes past events, enterprise risk management preempts future events. Together, management is in much better control of their organization. The book has a lot more than what was possible to present here. Go look at it. It is on a number of platforms. Have a preview. Wishing you the very best with your enterprise risk management.